Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining our group project for Advanced Applied Behavioral Analysis. My name's Kaylee.
My name is Claire.
My name is Maria.
I'm Denise.
And I'm Kathy.
And today we will be presenting on our behavioral replication project. We'll go ahead and share that. So today we'll be diving into our study, which focused on using goal setting and feedback to increase our weekly walking distances. And this is based off of a study done by Wack, Crossland, and Miltenberger that was done in 2014.
So first I'm going to review the literature that supported this as our study of choice. So this is the Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans. And they recommend that 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity aerobic activity, such as fast-paced walking, or 75 minutes of more intensive exercise, such as running. So that's a recommended amount of exercise per week for Americans. And this graph shows who actually was able to meet those physical activity guidelines for aerobic activity in 2018. And that demonstrates that only 65.4% of people over the age of 18 met these physical guidelines. So there is a need of an increase of this aerobic activities in America for people over the age of 18. Next, I'm going to discuss the benefits that would come from this exercise. Exercise health benefits both decrease the risk of all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease incidence and mortality, type 2 diabetes incidence, and some cancer incidence. So there's a lot of risks that are decreased by increasing your exercise. It can also reduce anxiety, impact sleep positively, reduce blood pressure, and more. This is all according to the Physical Activity Guidelines. Americans have also been studied and determined to spend 7.7 hours a day engaging in sedentary behaviors, such as sitting or lying down. That was in 2018. By decreasing this behavior of sitting and lying down and increasing exercise, people will experience these health benefits that I just listed. Next, I'm going to discuss some further literature. These are the studies that use the intervention of goal setting for exercise, which was the goal setting intervention that we used in our study. So these are the studies that came before us to show that it was an effective strategy to be implemented. So the first study that implemented this strategy in the realm of exercise was conducted in 2002. This was the Brobst and Ward study. It was conducted on 3 measurable soccer skills on 3 high school female soccer players. The same goal was created for all 3 soccer players, which was 90% accuracy across all selected soccer skills and detailed to each player individually. Following each practice that the soccer players had, the accuracy percentage of each player was both publicly posted, and those who met the goal received positive feedback, while those who did not meet the goal received encouragement to try harder. So following implementation of this package intervention, all of the players increased accuracy across all selected soccer skills during practice, but the one drawback was that it did not generalize into their games. So the goal setting was effective for their practice settings, but not for their game settings. The next study that also used goal setting, but this one was also a package of with the public posting as well, was the Ward and Cairn study. This was also conducted in 2002, but this focus was on football rather than soccer on that previous study. So 5 college-level football players were selected for the intervention. The selected variables to increase were the percentage of accuracy of 3 selected linebacker behaviors. So for the intervention, each football player selected their own goals while working with a researcher using their baseline data to guide their decisions. The goals were required to be higher than their baseline data. The goals were publicly posted, and following each practice, the public posting just showed whether or not each player met their goals. Before the intervention, all 5 players demonstrated their selected skills with 60 to 80% accuracy. And then following the direct intervention, they all demonstrated their skills with 90% or more accuracy, showing that this was an effective intervention for all of the players. And it actually, for these players, it did generalize to their game performances in contrast to that previous study. So it was a generalizable skill that they were able to gain. Finally, the Mallow, Hanton, and O'Brien study was conducted in 2006 on 5 college rugby players. This study selected 5 measurable rugby behaviors to target or to increase or decrease depending on the behavior. So each player selected a skill to increase or decrease after reviewing their baseline data. Goals were reviewed individually with each player 2 days prior to each rugby match, and 4 out of the 5 participants exceeded the change needed to meet their goal, and all players showed a significant change in their target behavior, ranging from 26% change to 160% change. So once again, this showed that that goal setting had an impact on skill performance in the exercise realm. So I'm going to go on to the next slide to discuss the direct study that we replicated. And this was the original study, which was using goal setting and feedback procedure to increase running distance. You'll see the only difference between that and our study is we targeted walking distance, whereas this study targeted running difference. This study each participant to self-select both a long-term running distance goal and short-term weekly running distance goals based on their baseline data. So each participant was required to engage in 3 sessions of running per week, and the guidelines specified that at least 2 out of the 3 sessions needed to meet the short-term goal that they had selected in order to increase the goal for the following week. These were 5 adult women aged 15 to 18 years old who were participating in this study. So the purpose of the study was to determine if there was an effect on running distance with the intervention of goal setting in combination with performance feedback. So tying that back to that other literature review that I just shared, there was goal setting and performance feedback in 2 of those, and goal setting in all 3 that was effective. So that was tied into this one as well. So a Nike Sportsman was used to track the distance for all of the participants of each session. And the participants each posted their results of their sessions prior to weekly meetings in which they received feedback on their distance. All 5 participants increased their running distance from baseline to intervention, demonstrating the effectiveness of this study and this intervention. And that concludes the literature review section of this presentation.
So the purpose
of the study is of our personal study replicates that original study, and the purpose is to examine the effects of goal setting and performance feedback for increasing walking distance among 5 adults. So once again, in contrast to the original study, the only difference is walking versus running.
Our method for the study includes the different participants, setting, materials, our behavioral definition, our data collection, the design, baseline intervention, and IOA and treatment integrity. The participants were all 5 females aged 25 to 56 years old. They all participated in the study for a class assignment. All females were graduate students without serious health problems that would pose a risk to themselves. Our materials were 2 different walking distance trackers, a camera or a phone camera, a computer, and 2 walking logs, which will be shown in Figure 1 and Figure 2, along with a pencil and workout attire. The setting for this intervention was different for each participant based on their location. Walking took place in different local parks, neighborhoods, trails, treadmills, etc. And all data collection took place in each individual's home or office setting. Our behavioral definition of our walking session is defined as a continuous walking with the intent to engage in a cardiovascular exercise. Walking was defined as putting one leg in front of the other in a continuous motion to move forward relative to the surrounding environment at a speed at or above 3.4 miles per hour. Non-examples include running, walking in the workplace, walking to a car, or other casual or daily walking without the intent to engage in cardiovascular exercise.
Okay, so data collection consisted of every participant measuring the distance that they walked and recording it on our tables and logs, which consisted of figure 1 and figure 2. We use different applications, pedometers, smartwatches, iPhone trackers to be able to track the distance that we were walking per session, and then we recorded it onto the figures. Every participant was also responsible for taking a screenshot or a picture of their device that was used to record the distance. And we also posted everything onto a Google Shared document so that the entire team could see everybody's progress throughout the week. So the next slide is an example of Table 1 and Table 2 that we use to record our baseline and intervention data on. This allowed everybody to see if we were meeting our weekly goals and how everybody was doing throughout the duration of the study. So the next slide is our design slide. In order to mirror the original study, we utilized a changing criteria within multiple baseline design across participants. And this was in order to assess the effects of the goal setting with personal performance feedback intervention for increasing the running distance for each participant. So during baseline, each participant wore their walking distance tracker, whether it was the app on their phone or the smartwatch. And we each recorded the data from each distance tracker onto the daily logs, as well as posted the pictures. And the baseline data went on until everybody reached a stable data, whether it was 5 or 6 sessions. And we did not set goals during this baseline collection. It was just to see how everyone was doing prior to the intervention. So the following are just examples of how everybody's baseline data collection went. As you can see, everybody reached a pretty stable trend before converting to the intervention. Overall, it was about averaging 5 to 6 sessions per participant until everybody was able to reach stability. Okay, so upon beginning treatment, all participants met virtually in order to set our long-term and short-term goals. The long-term goals consisted of the distance that each participant wanted to achieve for the single walk session by the end of the study, while the short-term goals consisted of the distance that each participant wanted to achieve in a single walk session per week. So the intervention lasted for 4 consecutive weeks immediately following the baseline, and participants engaged in walking sessions at least 3 times per week and tracked their daily distances using the screenshots, the pictures, and the recordings on the tables. And every week we aim to achieve the individual short-term goals for the week in at least 2 out of the 3 sessions in order to increase the next week's goal. If the participant did not reach that week's goal, they had the choice to either remain at the same level, at the same goal for the following week, or to decrease their goal for the following week. Our virtual meetings occurred on Google Hangouts every Tuesday, where we would report to the team how our progress was going, if we were meeting our weekly goal. And we updated all of our data via the Google Docs Drive so that everybody could see as well throughout the duration of treatment. So next is the IOA data. In order to collect IOA data, each participant used 2 distance trackers for 4 of the sessions. So at the same time, in order to record the distance walked during a session. So IOA was calculated using the distance that tracker A reported and the distance that tracker B reported on the same session in order to make sure that we were reporting an accurate number that was the same. And then IOA was calculated for 4 sessions using mean count per interval in order to calculate the IOA for each participant. So this shows kind of how IOA was calculated. There are 2 different distance trackers that were used for the same session, but they read the same or very, very similar distances that were walked for that session. And then the table shows what was reported and how it was calculated. So for treatment fidelity, we assessed during the treatment condition for 1/3 of the walking sessions, and each participant was randomly assigned a partner within the group using a random generator online. Each data collector utilized a fidelity form to check if the assigned partner completed the steps of the intervention procedures. The percentage of treatment fidelity was calculated by dividing the number of steps completed by the total number of steps. So we'll show you an example now of how we did this. The following is a chart that each participant used to be able to check treatment fidelity for their assigned partner. So there was a number of questions that were asked: if the participant used the walking distance tracker, if the participant recorded the distance appropriately, if the participant uploaded the weekly pictures to the Google Doc, if the participant was actively meeting with the team, et cetera, et cetera. So the partner would check off if all of these were corresponding, and then they would calculate the percentage for fidelity data at the bottom.
Okay, now I'm gonna discuss the results of our replication study. The results show that for all 5 participants who received the intervention, there was an increase in the walking distance. Regarding the short-term goals that we all set, they were met on 100% of walking sessions for Kathy, 91% of sessions for Maria, 75% of sessions for Denise and Kaylee, and on 66% of walking sessions for Claire. Additionally, all participants met their short-term goals. IOA was calculated at 98.83% across all participants, and it ranged from about 96% to 100%. As far as treatment fidelity, it was 100% across all participants. So next, we're gonna show the graph for each one of the participants. This is for Maria. And in the case of this graph, it showed that the walking distance was increased from a mean of 1.47 miles during baseline to a mean of 3.55 miles during the 4th week of intervention. And the goals that were set for these particular participants were 2, 2.5, 3, and 4 miles. And they were met on 91% of opportunities. Our next participant is Kathy, and her walking distance increased from a mean of 1.33 miles during baseline to a mean of 3.56 miles during the 4th week of intervention. And Kathy set her goals at 2, 2.5, 3, and 4 miles, and she met them on 100% of opportunities. Our next graph is going to show the results for Denise. And her walking distance increased from a mean of 0.37 miles during baseline to a mean of 0.89 miles during the 4th week of intervention. She had set her short-term goals at 0.5, 0.7, and 0.9 miles, and she met them on 75% of opportunities. Then we have Claire, whose walking distance increased from a mean of 0.3 miles during baseline to a mean of 2.07 miles during her third week of intervention. She had set her goals at 0.5 and 1 miles and met them on 66% of opportunities. And finally, our last participant is Kaylee, and her walking distance increased from a mean of 2.78 miles during baseline to a mean of 6.56 miles during the fourth week of intervention. Her goals were set at 4, 5, and 6 miles, and she met them on 75% of opportunities. Finally, on picture 4, we're going to show, we're showing the changing criterion within multiple baseline design across all participants. Unfortunately, the slide is too small to show all 5 participants in one graph, so we had to divide it into 2. But you can see the baseline on each week for each one of the participants and how for each one of them the walking distance increase when using goal setting and feedback as the intervention.
So the limitations of this study were quite extensive, unfortunately. One of the limitations definitely would include the weather for all participants. When this study began with baseline, it was in colder weather temperatures, and near the end of this intervention, it was in warmer temperatures. And so this kind of restricted the participants on their ability to engage in the walking sessions due to limited setting availability for each participant. Not every participant had access to an indoor facility that would allow them to engage in the walking sessions. So with the colder weather, it definitely led to a decrease in walking sessions and then an increase as well near the end during intervention due to the nice weather and the availability to be able to be outside and engage in those sessions. Another a limitation of this were time restraints for each of the participants. Every participant is a student as well as an employee. So the time that they have to engage in these walking sessions, if it's not already in their daily schedule, definitely would be a limitation for this study. Not always were participants able to engage in these walking sessions. So that was a limitation. Another limitation would be the treatment fidelity. Now, each participant did use walking distance trackers, but not every participant used the same tracker. So across participants, we had different data tracking. Although we did calculate IOA, it still is all different tracking systems, so our data could be skewed due to that. Another limitation of this study is the limited access to the in-person and frequent feedback. All the participants are in different locations, so being able to have in-person feedback was not feasible. Therefore, we had to conduct our feedback via technology, which is probably not as reinforcing or punishing as in-person feedback. And then also our feedback was not always as frequent as necessary or delayed at times due to conflicting schedules. So that would be a limitation due to having the treatment not done in the same way every single week. Another limitation of this study is the lack of maintenance data that is going to occur after. We're not sure if this intervention is going to continue to increase walking distances for each participant due to the lack of follow-up data that we're unable to collect. We're not sure if this is going to generalize to other locations or other activities, and so that's a big limitation of this study. And then other limitations include just uncontrolled factors throughout the study. the time of day that each participant was engaging in the walking sessions. Their nutrition intake would be different. And then other personal factors like health reasons, or perhaps, like I stated earlier, the lack of availability to engage in these walking sessions due to unavailable settings due to weather. Other factors could include time constraints and sleep that each participant was engaging in. There are many different factors for each individual that could really affect this intervention and give us many limitations.
Conclusion. The summary. This study was presented as a replication of the Wack, Crossland, Miltenberger 2014 study using goal setting and feedback procedures to increase running distance. In this study, both goal setting and performance feedback, as well as running distance, were increased. The purpose of this study was to examine the effects of goal setting and performance feedback for increasing walking distance of 5 women ages 25 to 56. Walking distance was chosen as opposed to the original study due to physical limitations of one or more of the participants. The behavior definition was stated, as were non-examples given. All participants in their individual settings, based on location, utilizing 2 walker trackers, took snapshots of walking distances they obtained for the day and collected data. Daily walking logs of walking distance and individual goals were determined by week and would increase through intervention phases. Baseline data was collected, as were 3 days per week of data through each phase. 2 distance trackers were used for validity, and individuals were partnered to ensure and complete fidelity through the treatment fidelity checklist. The design entailed a changing criterion within multiple baseline design across participants to access individual goal setting with personal feedback and performance feedback. Screenshots, data log, and fidelity checklist was shared through Google Drive documents. Treatment lasted for 4 consecutive weeks, and participants met virtually to set long and short-term goals. If a participant did not meet their goal, the participant remained at the current criterion level or decreased their goal for the following week. Intra-observer agreement was tracked for 4 days across phases by comparing tracker A with tracker B and recording the mean count per interval. The results summary. 2 of the participants remained on both short and long-term goal treatment. 3 participants remained on the same criterion level through 2 or 3 weeks of distance walking, and 3 fell short of personal goals on specific weeks for 1 or more of the days. However, the results showed that even though daily short-term goals were not met personally by a few of the participants, and a few remained at the same criterion level through a week or more of data tracking, all participants increased walking distance by the end of the study. Due to allowing for variation in personal goal criterion, long-term treatment was successful. Fidelity was calculated at 100%, and IOA success was 98.83%. Discussion. Due to time limitations of the study, maintenance data could not be obtained. Weather, time restraints, and treatment fidelity became issues. Trackers were not always reliable due to battery drain on phones or apps not properly functioning, caused a few participants to obtain further data. Difference between tracking programs caused one participant to use the same program on 2 different phones, and still the data was not reliable for the exact same walking distance. A question posed. Due to weather limitations, treadmill was an option presented for setting. However, in attempting to use a treadmill, walking distance data from the treadmill was able to be collected, but the secondary tracker was not effective due to remaining in the same location. Therefore, carrying across environments was in generalization was a bit limited. How could this be rectified in replication of further study? Further study is required in types of trackers used, maintenance data being collected, time restraints and weather limitations that not only hindered treatment fidelity, but obstacles that were beyond our control. If identical trackers were presented to each participant, further study might be more successful. Availability of an app tracker to collect secondary treadmill information for fidelity might aid in weather limitations. Time restrictions and maintenance data being collected would be a point for furthering this or any other similar study presented.
We'd like to thank everyone for joining in on our presentation on our behavioral modification intervention. And on our final slide, you will see all of our different references that we've used for our presentation. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments and we will be happy to answer them. Again, thank you all for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed our presentation. And again, thank you.